leaves the plant. Now that's very subtle, but for when you're thinking of skincare as a therapy, to me it's fantastic because they're taking it to that whole other level. And the big thing that Hauschka and all the skincare that we guarantee, there'll be no chemicals or parabens or sulfates or any of these things that can cause either irritation or more serious health issues in the body.
And could you give an example, for example, of some of those conditions or some of the side effects of chemical-based?
Oh, well, a lot of the time, sometimes you can see it where people just have reactions in the skin, you know, but I think even again, it's more like, we'll go back to Hauschka again, because their most famous cream is a rose day cream, and the rose cream has 25 rose petals in each little tube of it. But rose oil has been used for millennia to heal. So like blemishes on the skin, dry patches on the skin, little rough areas on the skin, rose will be a brilliant healer. It's also a natural barrier, rose oil. So when we live now in the, you know, where we have radiated heat on the inside and weather on the outside, depending on what it is, that can cause a lot of damage. What they're trying to do all the time is use as natural ingredients as possible to allow the skin to be the best it can be. I suppose the other one that's very famous, it's rosehip seed oil, and it came out from a different company now. They're a New Zealand company called Trilogy, and Trilogy's got a lot of awareness in the last couple of years. They've been on the Expose TV program a couple of times, and you get some of the celebrities like Downey wears it all the time, and you know, so when you get a few of on that level, it gets a lot of interest. But the big thing with Trilogy, and again it's like Hauschka, no chemicals, no parabens, as natural ingredients as possible, but they brought out a rosehip seed oil, and what it did was 2 drops of oil did your neck and your face, and it was like for fine lines and anti-wrinkle and dry skin, and so it really helped the skin in the aging process, helped to put the natural moisture, natural oils back into the skin, and that it has become quite famous over the last 4 or 5 years. It's a very simple, all that's in it is the rosehip seed oil, so nothing else is needed, but again nature provides a lot of that, so you know, so and it is that awareness is growing a lot, you know, and the creams are aesthetically beautiful because the smells of the plants are fantastic.
Very nice.
And then because you're working with natural oils, usually the skin will take it in quite easily as well. Now, not saying some of the you know, the really well known modern skincare, you know, like your Lancomes and your Elemis and all those, they will have the oils in them, as good natural oils in them as well, but they also have the other stuff. You know, so that's really the difference. You know.
And there are different methods of treating the skin, aren't there? So, for example, we might have bath products that might immerse the skin in a particular type of product. So can you describe how does that work?
I suppose again, probably the most famous in the bath care would be again Hauschka, because they do everything. So they do again rose and lavender and lemon in essential oils in bath care. But the big thing is, again, even more than moisturizers and cleansers, the bath products hold a lot of the strong chemicals like the sodium lauryl sulfates and the parabens. Now they're the things that make it look smelly and foamy and whatever, but can be really carcinogenic on the skin. And there's a lot of you know, awareness out there now of just how damaging these things can be, particularly to little people, because their skin is very poor. You know, they're open, they'll absorb everything. You know, but in truth, we all do. When you're sitting in the bath, you're opening the pores to allow that transference. Like, we want to draw out fluids and toxins and whatever, but we want to. But we're also absorbing whatever oils or whatever are in the bath. So there are a lot of you know, very well known companies that have quite strong chemicals in them, you know, that people would use for relaxation and whatever. So we would very much have the idea of using Dead Sea salt into the bath, and that's like salts from the Dead Sea. So that's like your natural Radox or whatever, and a handful of that is great for aching legs, tiredness, back pain, any of that, because it'll have that drawing and pulling effect. The minerals are so high. You know the way in the Dead Sea you can't float, you can't swim. You float because there's such a high mineral content. So the minerals have that drawing out effect of impurities out of the skin, but also help to balance the natural mineral balance of the skin. And then you would have things like then Jason, who do all the foamy things but without the sodium lauryl sulfate in it. So you have the same foam, well, not quite the same, they're not overly bubbly, but they certainly do bubble, but they would have it then no parabens, no sulfate, no sodium lauryl sulfate, no chemical, none of the usual chemicals in it.
And that's Jason. And
Jason are the big one for the bath. They're like, you get big family tubs of them, you know, so that they're about €12 or whatever. So it's a one that families could easily change to without being overly expensive. The big thing Jason do is they try and do it very simply, very simple packaging, but a very good price on it.
Good,
and a little goes a long way.
It makes it very accessible to
exactly.
people.
Well, that's the idea. There's no point in talking about it all if it's not affordable. For most people, because you want it to be an awareness. So once you have the awareness, you need to be able to afford it. So we try very much, and Jason's a great company for that, for doing things that are very affordable. In fact, often a lot cheaper than the more household names that have all the chemicals in them.
Oh, very good. So we've talked about creams, we've talked about immersing the skin in water-based products like sea salts. What about sun? That's a big one.
Yes. Now it's so important to protect. You know, there's a bit of a double thing on this at the minute, because we're finding that so many Irish people are so low in vitamin D, and vitamin D has so many relevances in the body. They're talking about it for immune system, they're talking about it for inflammation conditions, mood conditions, depression, all of that sort of thing, and it's such a simple thing to take, but because we're all, let's face it, in Ireland we're not getting the sun, but even if we do, we're protecting. So the importance of just adding vitamin D seems to be huge now, and they're getting much more awareness on it. Again, we try and do as natural a products as possible for sun protection. Now, interestingly, the European legislation decided, I think it's maybe about 4 or 5 years back, that all SPF had to be, as I would call it, synthetic. They couldn't simply be of natural sources.
Was there
so
a reason behind
not
that?
At all. Not at all. And the Hauschka fought that, so they fought it in all the European courts and whatever, and they felt so badly or so strongly about it that they were actually most famous for their sun range that had natural SPF in it, that they withdrew the whole range rather than put anything exactly. So it's taken as absolutely, and they have they're actually a cooperative, so they really work on principles on every level, but they felt that everything they stood by when they put in the synthetics they would be letting down, really. So where sun protection is concerned, probably the nicest things are the aloe vera based, and if people think about aloe vera, if they have the plant at home and they cut the plant, the juice of the aloe vera heals a burn. So aloe vera in sun protection is fantastic. Now again, the Jason do really good value sun protection, but their factors, when they put the factors into them, they have to be synthetic. But their actual base of it is just pure aloe vera, and their after sun is simply pure aloe vera, and it's one of the nicest things that you could get. They would do like the 25 factor, an 8 factor, and then the Dead Sea Spa range, they do a 50 factor.
Oh, okay.
And this Jason people also will do a 45 factor. So for the little people, sometimes it's the 50 factor is very good for anybody who is very sensitive skin. Now, the difference being really is that they will have to put their factors in synthetically, but everything else in the product will be natural. So it's still much better than a lot of the sun factors that are out there are simply all chemical or synthetic. So you're still getting your natural aspect. And sometimes, you know, people decide for you know, face sun protection. What we would recommend is that you still use your purity next to the skin. So then maybe use your Hauschka moisturizer or whatever, and then put your sun factor over that.
Yeah.
So that the skin is still getting the nurturance and the benefit of the natural product.
Yeah.
And then, but the body's getting the protection of the factor.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
so
good.
it's quite a